Hey guys, I'm Ethan, your New York-based organization development coach. And as you may know, I have recently started a playlist on my YouTube channel where I could take a look at organizations that are either succeeding at or challenged with building and maintaining a strong organizational culture. And today, I'd like to take a look at Boeing, given the most recent Federal Aviation Association findings in their 50-page report that they released yesterday, Monday, February 26th, regarding the outcome of an investigation into Boeing's most recent challenges. So I'm going to play a video and then we're going to dive right in, and I'm going to give some analysis and where I think Boeing can tighten up some aspects of its culture.
New at 5, a panel of experts today slamming Boeing for its safety culture.
Yes, almost 2 months after part of an Alaska Airlines flight, that door panel, of course, flew off mid-flight. In a new report, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, says experts found a lack of awareness of safety metrics at all levels of Boeing.
So let me just take a pause right here. People within Boeing were not aware of safety guidelines and regulations. So right there, that's a two-pronged issue from a culture perspective. One is the people who needed to know, who were tasked with ensuring safety at Boeing, had no idea. Second, which is tied to the first, it's a failure in communication. And so, as I've often said on this channel, and all my other videos on my YouTube channel, most organizations start to get into trouble and you can pinpoint it in a breakdown in communication. So let's watch the rest of this. It's a short video.
They also point to a disconnect between senior management and workers, adding employees were concerned about retaliation if they raised any issues.
Okay, so next alarm in this fire alarm drill is when employees who are tasked with ensuring safety are fearful when they pull the proverbial stop plug, when they communicate potential problems up the chain of command. They're fearful about repercussions and punishment. That is an incredibly powerful indication that there is something that's broken at the culture in Boeing from a safety perspective. So let me just kind of give some additional insight, and then I'll share with you some thoughts on where Boeing can go from here from a culture standpoint. So in Fortune, as a result of the Federal Administration findings on Monday, Boeing Safety Disconnect was ripped in their scathing report, accusing the rank and file of covering up quality issues for fear of retaliation. So again, these are some really monumental problems that you can take out of as a lesson learned the Boeing most recent troubles over the last few years and apply it into your own organization. So breakdown in communication, lack of people who need to be in the know are not in the know, and fear of reprisals and repercussions or being punished for bringing bad news back. So when it comes to safety as a culture characteristic of Boeing, there's a tremendous disconnect, according to Fortune magazine, between senior management, those who are at the top, unfortunately, of those old vestige command control organizations, and the workers, those employees who are responsible for checking the company's planes, question whether they can even raise issues without fear of retaliation, according to a panel of outside experts who contributed to the findings in this report that the FAA released yesterday, Monday, February 26th. So let's talk about it. This near accident, you may recall that there were bolts that were screwed into the door, a panel that covered up a non-functioning door. There were issues with the insertion and the bolts. So Boeing, in the report from the FAA, was faulted for ineffective procedures and a breakdown in communications between senior management and members of staff. But there's some other stuff going on when you dive into this series of unfortunate events that are going on at Boeing and have for the last few years. So there was also a significant number of changes to some pretty complex procedures and also failure in terms of training that led to employee confusion. These are other findings that the panel released in their 50-page report. So This panel, as I mentioned, that was covering an unused door, literally flew off during an Alaska Airlines flight back on January 5th. So the report that was issued from the FAA also shows that there's a significant amount of work that needs to be done at Boeing, despite its existing efforts, the efforts it's already made to transform and to replace its culture and to bolster safety measures. So going back even a few years ago, you may recall that Boeing, unfortunately, was responsible for, because of its culture of failed safety measures. There were two fatal 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019. And those two crashes killed 346 people, 346 people. So there are some very real world repercussions when organizations struggle from a culture perspective. So I've been talking about this for 15 years, and this is what led me to dedicate a channel to where I analyze organizations that are either doing a really great job building amazing workplace cultures. For example, I recently had my Chasing the Dream podcast, had Tom Hertner, head of HR at Chewy, come in and talk about the culture there. I've talked most recently about Zoom Communications laying off all of the diversity, equity, inclusion staff, 200 employees. So that's what this channel is dedicated to, is uncovering this kind of deep dive into organizational culture ripped from today's headlines. So if you look at the problems that Boeing has had, the largest European airline, Ryanair, the largest airline in Europe, their CEO, Mike O'Leary, slammed Boeing for being, as he called, the manufacturing shit show. His words, not mine. When there were delays from Boeing in getting aircraft deliveries going back to this past summer for those 737 MAX jets. You may recall I just mentioned back in 2018 and 2019, there were two crashes, plane crashes with Boeing's 737 MAX that led to 346 deaths. So let's kind of talk about this now that I've kind of given you a scope of what Boeing is contending with. What happens? What happens moving forward? Well, that's really the million-dollar question. An organization typically responds most clearly, most immediately when there's financial adverse impact in terms of behaviors or challenges. And in this case, Boeing's up against it. So you look at decrease in relationships, decrease in vendor and supplier contracts. You look at negative press, which reduces greatly an organization's reputational brand. You look at the employees. Look at the employees at Boeing. Imagine for a moment what it feels like to be an employee on the line, responsible for assembling and quality control in these Boeing airplanes. I mean, that creates toxic culture, which we know from decades of organizational development research, that kind of adverse negative impact of the culture there is going to lead to people leaving. It's going to lead to people doing the bare minimum, not speaking up, not taking their work as seriously, silent quitting. It'll lead to dips in employee performance and productivity. So Boeing immediately needs to not just look at employees, but to look at a holistic top-down approach to their human capital management, from senior leadership to middle management to frontline employees, and going across the organization, across functions like R&D, assembly, quality control, finance, inspection, tech ops. They need to do a holistic deep breath assessment of the organization. And then they need to do an in and out assessment, meaning look within the culture of Boeing, outside to the myriad stakeholders that they interact with, Ryanair, assembly and component part manufacturers, the FAA, other airlines for best practice. So this is it. This is it from a Boeing perspective, right? So once you have that bright, hot spotlight as an organization of external stakeholders taking a look at your culture, it's time to step up. And so we'll see how Boeing responds. If you like this video, if you find it helpful, If you, as a senior executive, feel like this is the kind of coverage that I provide, that you can say, I can extrapolate some lessons learned and apply to my organization to build an amazing culture, please like, share, go down below, and definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel, where over the past few months, I've placed several hundred videos like this. Come back often. I'll constantly be doing a deep dive and sharing knowledge into examples of organizations that excel at building an amazing workplace culture and or who are struggling to achieve a 21st century compassionate organization culture. Thank you.